Welcome to Building Web Apps with the MERN Stack using MongoDB Atlas and Google Cloud Platform. We are going to be learning the MERN Stack by creating an exercise tracker app. My name is Bo Carnes, and I am a teacher and developer with freecodecamp.org. We will be first starting with an introduction to the MERN Stack. Then we'll be going over some database concepts. Then we will talk about how to get started with MongoDB Atlas, which is the database we'll be using for our MERN Stack app. Then we'll be getting into our code, and I will be actually creating the backend of the exercise tracker app and showing you how I do it. After that, we will have an introduction to React, and then start creating the front end of the exercise tracker app with React, and finally we'll connect the front end to the back end. So what is the MERN Stack? Well, it consists of the following technologies. We have MongoDB, Express, React, and Node.js. That's what MERN stands for. So Node.js is the JavaScript runtime environment that allows you to exercise JavaScript code outside of a browser, such as on a server. And Express is a web application framework for Node.js. It allows us to easily create a web server. And then MongoDB is the document-based open source database. So in our app, we'll be storing our data in MongoDB. And then finally, the front end is React, which is a JavaScript front-end library for building user interfaces. And then finally, at the bottom there, we will be using Mongoose, which is a simple schema-based solution to model application data. Basically, it makes it easier to use MongoDB in Node.js. So let's review some database concepts. We're going to just review some terminology. So what a lot of people are used to are tabular or relational databases. So we think of things like databases, tables, rows, and stuff like that. So MongoDB has similar concepts that use different terms. So I just want to kind of make everyone aware of those terms. So instead of table, we have collections. Instead of rows, we have documents. We can do join operations with the lookup operator. Instead of foreign keys, we utilize references. And just as a point of clarification, a lot of people talk about MongoDB as a non-relational database. But really, all data is relational. So sometimes I use the term tabular to describe the legacy databases that use tables. MongoDB is very well suited for handling data with a wide variety of relationships. We're not going to cover all of these concepts in the app today, but I just wanted you to be aware of some of the differences. So let's look at the document model. This is an example of what a MongoDB document looks like. It looks a lot like JSON. We can see a variety of relationships, an address, a title, and MongoDB stores data on disk in the BSON format, which stands for binary JSON. This provides a wide variety of support for data types like strings and integers. The document model also allows for nesting documents inside each other. These subdocuments are one of the great things about the document model. So it allows us to apply the concept of data that's accessed together is stored together in an application. We also have the ability to store information inside arrays, which is another powerful feature of the document model. And as I mentioned, these documents are JSON structured objects, which is how most developers think of things. So a person is an object that has various attributes, like a job title, address, and stuff like that. So this allows modern development practices to use the document model in a very intuitive way without having to break the data apart to put into tables and normalize things. So we will be using MongoDB Atlas, which is a really fast and easy way to get started with MongoDB. So some people would just run up MongoDB locally on their local computer for testing, but MongoDB Atlas actually makes things a lot easier even if you're just doing a local project. So the first step for getting started with MongoDB Atlas is to sign in. So if you go to the web page, you'll just get this getting started screen. And once you've logged into MongoDB Atlas, we need to set up a place to store the data. We need a cluster. So this is the screen that you'll see when you first get logged in. And to start building the cluster, you're going to click the New Project button. That's the button right here. And then after you click that, you'll be able to build a cluster. The big green button in the middle here allows us to create and configure a cluster. So once you click that, it will bring you to this screen where you can create a new cluster. So here you can see that in MongoDB Atlas, there's a bunch of providers. We'll be using Google Cloud Platform. And then you can choose the region. We're going to be using the free tier today, which is going to be great for our app. And just when you're getting started and learning how to use things, I recommend starting with the free tier. And then once you get things going, you can always switch to another tier later. So you just got to click a region associated with the free tier. And then, so the free tier is just the MO sandbox. It gives a server size of 512 megabytes, which is typically plenty to get started with. And then one thing to notice is at the bottom, it's always going to show you how much things cost. So in this case, it's free. Then you can click Create Cluster, and then the provisioning will start. So you can see it says it's going to take 7 to 10 minutes to provision. And it's often quicker than that, but it's just going to take some time to set things up. So once it's created, we're ready to get a couple of security things configured and finally get a connection string. So once it's configured, you'll be on this screen where you can set up the security. And just so you know, I'm doing this all in a slideshow right now, but in a little bit, we'll actually be on the actual website, so you can see where all this is on the actual website. But from a security standpoint, we need to set up IP whitelist addresses and a database user. So for this project, since it's just going to be hosted on locally, we can add your current IP address for the whitelist IP address, and then you can create any username and password for the MongoDB user. So now we can get our connection information. There are a few different ways that we provide information to connect to MongoDB Atlas. Through the MongoDB shell, which is a command line interface, with the application connection string, which is what we'll be using today, and through MongoDB Compass, which is a GUI tool for interacting with data stored in MongoDB. So then, after you click the Connect Your Application, you'll be taken to the screen on the right here, and we're provided information on getting a connection string, and then some connection examples for different languages. But we'll just need the connection string, and normally you would click Copy here, but this is just a slideshow, so I can't do that. But we will be going to this exact screen and copying the connection string to use in our app. Okay, we're just about to write some code, but let's just quickly review the collections in our database. Our application is going to contain exercises and users, and every exercise has one user. Once you see how simple this is, you'll realize that we could have probably just had one collection, but just for the sake of example, to see how it would work, we're going to have the exercises and users collection. So now we really will get into the code. So I have Visual Studio Code up here, and the first thing we're going to do is verify Node is installed. So I'll just do node-v, and I do have it installed. If you don't, you're going to have to make sure you install it. but I'll leave that up to you to figure out how to do that. So next we'll create the initial React project by using create React app. And if we use the npx command, then we can run create React app without installing it first. So I'll do npx create React app, and then I'm just going to be calling it MERN exercise tracker. And then this is going to create a directory containing the default React project template with all the dependencies installed. So while this is installing, I'm actually going to go back over here to just talk a little bit about MongoDB object IDs. So this object ID is automatically generated by the MongoDB driver and is guaranteed to be unique across a collection. So you can see different parts of the object ID represent different things. And we can define our own ID if we'd like, but it must be unique for each document in a collection. For this application, I'm just going to let MongoDB handle it. So let's go back over to Visual Studio Code, and you can see that our MERN exercise tracker is all set up, our React project. So right in the terminal, let me just make this a little bigger here. Right in the terminal, I'm going to do cd MERN and go into the directory there. And normally if I wanted to start a web server, the React development server, I would type in npm start here. But first we're going to create the back end, and then we're going to come back to create the front end. So we'll start by creating the back end and connecting it to MongoDB Atlas and Google Cloud, and then we'll come back and write the React later. So inside this folder, we are going to create a new folder called backend. So a lot of people would create the backend in a separate folder from our front end folder, but just to simplify things, since this is a simple project, we'll just create the backend folder right in our React front end folder. So let's go into the backend folder. Okay, now we'll create a package.json file inside the folder by doing npm init and then y to answer yes to all the questions it asks. Okay, now we can install a few dependencies. So npm install express, CORS, mongoose, and .env. Okay, so what are these packages? Well, we already discussed Express, which is a lightweight and fast web framework for Node.js. CORS stands for Cross-Origin Resource Sharing, and this allows AJAX requests to skip the same origin policy and access resources from remote hosts. The CORS package provides an Express middleware that can enable CORS with different options, this is going to make it so we can easily access something outside of our server from our server. So also we already discussed Mongoose, which makes interacting with MongoDB through Node.js simpler. And the last one is .env, which loads environment variables from a .env file into process.env. This makes development simpler. So instead of setting environment variables on our development machine, they can be stored in a file. We'll create a .env file later. So we'll install one final package globally. So I'll do npm install g for globally and nodemon. So nodemon makes development easier. It's a tool that helps develop Node.js based applications by automatically restarting the Node application when file changes in the directory are detected. So let's see, it looks like we have some sort of error. I wonder what I should do a sudo. Whenever you're going to install something globally, we'll do sudo install g nodemon. So whenever we update our server file, it will automatically restart the server. So that's what NodeMon does. So now it's time to create our server. So inside the backend folder, I'm going to create a new file called server.js. So I'm actually just going to paste in some code here, and then I'll talk about what the code is. So first, we're going to require all the things we're going to need. Actually, we're not going to need body parser. I originally thought we were going to need body parser, but it's not needed in the new version of Express. And this, since it's included in Express, so I can actually change that to Express there. So we're just gonna need Express and cores, and then this configures so we can have our environment variables in the .env file. This is how we're going to create our Express server. And then you can see the port that the server will be on. Then we have our middleware. So this is the cores middleware, and this is going to allow us to parse JSON because our server is going to be sending and receiving JSON. And then you can see this line here is what starts the server. It starts listening on a certain port. So once we have that, I can save this and I can start the server. So NodeMon server right in the terminal here. So now we have the server running. You can see it says server is running on port 5000. So now we've gotten to the point where we can connect our database to our database on MongoDB Atlas. So at the top of this server file, after this require cores line, I'm going to add the following line: const mongoose equals require mongoose. So mongoose is what's going to help us to connect to our MongoDB database. So now the next section I'm actually just going to paste in here. So after we set up our middleware, we're going to do this. So we have our URI, which is our database URI. This is something we have to get from the MongoDB Atlas dashboard, which we'll do in a minute here. So here, mongoose.connect, and we pass in the URI. That's where our database is stored. And that's how we start our connection. So you can see we have some flags here. The first one is added, this use new user parser true. That's added because the MongoDB Node.js driver rewrote the tool it uses to parse MongoDB connection strings. And because this is such a big change, they put the new connection string parser behind a flag. And it's kind of similar for this use create index true. It's to deal with MongoDB deprecating the ensure index function. You don't really have to remember all that. Just put these things in every time to deal with some of the updates to MongoDB. So for the connection string to work, we are going to have to set this environment variable. So in the server folder, first of all, I will save this, and then we're going to see an error down here because we don't have this environmental variable yet. So I'm going to go into my backend folder, and I'm going to create a new file called .env. So now we need to get the URI, or the connection string, from MongoDB Atlas. So let me go over to that. Here's MongoDB Atlas, and I already have the cluster created. So if I click connect here, connect your app to your application, and I'm going to copy the connection string. So now I can go back over to my file here, and we just have to create the environmental variable. So remember, it's called atlas _URI, and then I'm going to set what it's equal to. And now I'm just going to paste in the URI connection here. And one thing I have to do at the beginning, you'll see that there's this password here. So here I just actually have to type in my password. So don't tell anybody what my password is, but it's mean123. For extra security, I always have the exact same password as my username. No, that's not true. You should never do that. But in this case, that's what I'm doing here. So now we should, if I save this, and then if I restart my server, we should see MongoDB right in the console terminal, MongoDB database connection established successfully. So we got that right here. So connection.once, so once the connection is open, it's going to log that MongoDB database connection established successfully. So we're now connected to the database. But now we have to start being able to put things into the database and read things from the database. So we'll create our database schema using Mongoose. We'll have two entities. We'll have exercises and users. So inside the backend folder, I'm going to create a new directory called, let's see, what did I do wrong there? New folder called models. And inside models, I'm going to create two new files. So we'll have exercise.model.js, and then I'm going to create another file called user.model.js. Okay, so for the user model, I'm just going to put in some code, and then I'll explain what it is here. So this user schema, you can see that first we require Mongoose, then we get a new mongoose.schema, and so all Mongoose schemas start basically the same, and we have our user schema, that's the name, and this only has a single field, which is username. Then we have some validations to the username. We know it's going to be type string, it's required, we know it has to be unique. Trim means it will trim white space off the end. If someone types in some spaces, it will be trimmed off. And then max length or min length of 3. So it has to be at least 3 characters long. So then we're going to also include timestamps, which will automatically create fields for when it was created and when it was modified. And then we just have mongoose.model user. That can be anything. That's just the name that we're going to use. Then user schema, and then we're going to export it here. So a lot of this is going to look the same for any Mongoose schema. So I'm going to save that, and then we're going to do the exercise model. So you'll see the exercise model is going to look almost exactly the same with just a few changes. Let's zoom out just a little bit. So everything's the same, except this time instead of 1 field, we have 4 fields. Now it takes up less space because the validations are all on the same line as the field, and we don't have as many validations. So you can see we have username, description, duration, and date. So this is all the information we're going to store about the exercises. And you can see they're all required, but we have some different data types. We have strings, we have a number, and then the date data type. So now we've got those created, and now we need to add the API endpoint routes so the server can be used to perform the CRUD operations, which is create, read, update, and delete. So inside this backend folder, I'm going to create another folder named routes. And inside that folder, I'm going to create a file called exercises.js and a file called users.js. So we'll come back to those files. First, we'll tell the server to use the files we just created. So toward the end of this file, right before this app.listen, we're going to add some lines here. So we have to require the files and then use the files. So here we're requiring the files, and then basically we're just importing them into here, and then we're doing app.use to use these files. So now whenever someone goes to our root URL and then you put /exercises at the end, it's going to load everything in the exercises router. And if someone goes to /users, it will load everything in the users router. Now once I show you this on the browser, it will probably make more sense. So you'll be seeing that soon. So let's build out the router files. I'll save that. And then there's going to be an error here because we haven't actually built out these router files yet. Let me go to exercises.js. Actually, we'll start with the users.js. Okay, I'll paste in some code and then I'll explain it here. So we need the express router because this is a route that we're creating. And here, we're going to require the model. So this is the Mongoose model that we created, that we just recently created. And here is our first route. So this is the first endpoint that handles incoming HTTP GET requests on the /users URL path. So we have our root URL, which is localhost, I think localhost 5000. So we have localhost 5000, and then it's /users, and then if it's just a slash at the end, /users/, then if it's a GET request, then this is going to happen. So it says users.find. This is a Mongoose method that it's going to get a list of all the users from the MongoDB Atlas database. The find method returns a promise. So the results are returned in JSON format. And you can see right here. So after it finds, then we're going to get all the users, and then rest.json means we're going to return something in JSON format, and what we're going to return are the users that we got from the database. And then if there's an error.catch, we're going to return a status 400 with an error, with just the error message here. So the second endpoint handles incoming HTTP post requests. You can see if it has /add on the end and it's a post request, then we'll handle those. The new username is part of the request body. So rec.body.username is going to be assigned to this username variable. And then we're going to create a new instance of a user using the username. And finally, the new user is saved to the database with the save method right here. And we return, so then after the user is saved to the database, the MongoDB Atlas database, then we'll return user added in JSON, or else we'll return the error message. So finally, and this is what you have to do for all, just a standard thing for these router files, module.export equals router. So we're just exporting the router. So let me save that, and I'll go into the exercises file, and I'm going to paste some code in here, and these are the same two endpoints. So it's going to be basically the same. We're requiring router, we're requiring our model that we created. So if it's the root URL /exercises/ at the end, if it's a GET request, then we're going to run this mongoose command, exercise.find. Then after we find all the exercises from the database, we'll take those exercises and then return them as JSON, or else there's an error. So this part is a little different, but it's basically the same as before. If we have exercises /add and it's a post request, then instead of just having a username in the body, we're going to have the username, we'll have description, the duration, and the date. And we'll assign it to these variables. And you can see that we're converting the duration to a number, and we're converting the date to a date data type. And then we just create a new exercise using all of these variables that we got up here. And then we save the exercise. And after it's saved, .then, it's a promise, we're going to return the JSON exercise added. We'll add some more API endpoints soon, but first let's test the server API. We'll be using a tool called Insomnia to test the API. Another popular tool for this purpose is Postman. They both do pretty much the same thing. So once you get into Insomnia, or you could use Postman, we'll create a new post request using JSON. So I'll do a post request, and all this stuff can be changed on the next screen here. So we have this post request, and we'll go to the URL http://localhost 5000/users/add. Now, we should still have our server running. So in the body, I will select JSON, and we are going to send a username. We're going to add a username. So I'm going to create this JSON object here, username Bo. And if I click post here, I'm going to click send, and it says user added. So now we can send a GET request to get a list of the users back. So first let me just add another user. So I'll just do Quincy here and send that, and user added. So now we can do a GET request to get the list of users back. So instead of users/add, it will just be users/ without the add at the end. I'll change this post to GET, and we don't need this here. And I'll just click send, and you can see our users here with some additional information here. So you can see MongoDB automatically created this object ID, and then we also have the created at and updated at date here. So we have the username Bo and the username Quincy. So we can also see the users we just added on the MongoDB Atlas dashboard. So let me go over to that. So here is the MongoDB Atlas dashboard, cloud.mongodb.com. So if I click refresh here, we should see, we see our users here. So if you were back on this screen, you would have to click collections, and then it's going to load our users here. And then if you see in this documents, we have Bo and Quincy. So these are the exact users that we added. So we've successfully created our backend that can put items into our MongoDB Atlas database. Okay, let's add a few exercises. So let me go back over here. So instead of /users, it's going to be /exercises, and then it's going to be /add. So just so you see how this is all working, I'll go back over to our code editor, and when you go to /add, you exercises /add and do a post request, it's going to be expecting a username, a description, a duration, and a date. It's going to be expecting variables in our JSON object that have all of those keys or all those names, and then it's going to take all those things and it's going to save an exercise. So let's go back over to Insomnia, and in JSON we need a username and set that to Bo, and then we need a description and we'll set that to run, and then for duration, and the duration is in minutes, which you'll see once we create our front end. We'll do 9 minutes. And for date, I'm actually just going to copy this date from over here. Once we create our front end, you'll never have to actually enter a date, because you'll be just selecting a date from a drop-down menu. But since we're entering it directly into the database, we'll just copy and paste. So if I click send, we should see, oh, cannot get because I forgot to change this to a post request. Our server did not have anything for a GET request to that URL, but let's try a post request. Okay, exercise added. Well, let's add one more exercise, which is going to be a bike ride, same username, and this time it was for 30 minutes, and I'll change this to, let's see, 27, and if I just send that, we just added another exercise. So we can do a GET request if I just delete /add, change this to .get, and then click send. Now we sent this JSON, but it just didn't do anything with it. It's okay to send it, it's just extra, didn't do anything with it. But you can see over here, we have our 2 exercises we added. So username Bo, description run, duration 9, we have the date. Same down here, we have a bike ride. And if we go over to MongoDB Atlas, and then I'm just going to click refresh, go into the exercises, and you can see here's the 2 exercises we added. So, and right from here you can actually do some editing. Like if I want to say, actually, this was 60 minutes, then I can update, and so we're able to easily update. We can delete things. You can do all sorts of changes right from this dashboard here. So that makes things, that's nice. It kind of makes things simpler. So now that we've tested everything, we'll finish up the exercise routes. So let me go back into the code editor. We're actually done with the user's routes. All we're going to have is the get and add. Now in like a real production app, you would have a update and a delete. For now, we'll just do that from the MongoDB Atlas dashboard. But for the exercises, we will have everything. We're going to have all the whole CRUD. We'll have delete, update, and that's what we're going to add now. I am going to, right here, I'm going to paste in the other routes, and then I'll talk about them here. So we just added this route. We have a /:ID. So this :ID is like a variable. So this is this is an object ID that's created automatically by MongoDB. So if you go to exercises / and then put the object ID from the database, and then you do a GET request, well, we're going to return just the information about that exercise. So we have exercise.findById, and then the request.params.id. So this is getting the ID directly from the URL here, and we're finding by that ID. And then once we get the exercise, we're going to return it as JSON, or else we are going to just return an error. So then the next thing it starts off the same. So this was the GET request, and this looks exactly the same, but instead of GET, it's delete. So if you pass in the object ID, but it's a delete request instead of a GET request, it's going to do find by ID and delete. Again, it's going to get it right from the URL here, and it will delete it from the database. So it says .then, after it's deleted, it's going to return exercise deleted. So the next one is the update. So if the route is exercises /update /ID, so the object ID, and it's at post, then we're going to update it. So first we have to find the current exercise, and then we update it. So exercise.findById, and then we pass in the parameter right from the URL here. So after we get the exercises, .then, and then what we're going to do with the exercise is, well, we're going to take the exercise.username. So this is the exercise we just got from the database, but we're going to set the username to equal rec.body.username, because it's going to have this route needs to receive a JSON object that's going to contain a username, a description, a duration, and a date. just like when you're adding a new exercise. But this time, we're taking all that information and assigning it to the fields of the exercise that already exists. And then we're going to save that exercise with the new information. And then we're going to return exercise updated. So now that we've seen all of these endpoints, let's go and test these other ones. So I'll go right back over here, and let's test the first endpoint we added. So first we need to get an ID. I'm just going to copy this ID right from here, and then we'll have /exercises/ID, and this is going to be a GET request. If I send this, it will just return a single exercise. So before, it returned all the exercises, but now that we have this new route where it's localhost 5000/exercises/the ID, it's going to return just the first exercise that corresponds to that ID. The next thing we're going to try out is we're going to try editing it. So /exercises/update, and then so we have /exercises/update, and then we have the ID here. I wonder if I can, here now we'll be able to see more of it. Exercises/update/ID, and this is going to be a post. This is the one where the description is run from before. It has to receive a username, description, duration, and date. So the new description, instead of run from what it was before, it's going to be walk. And the duration is now going to be, how about 120? And then we'll keep the date the same. So I'm going to copy this date and paste it in here. So right now, the way the program works is that you always have to send it the username, description, duration, and date. You cannot just send the field that you want to update. You always have to send all the fields, or there'll be an error. Now that's something that you can refactor later, is make it so you can just receive one of the items instead of all of them. But for now, we just have it set up where it has to accept every single field. So if I post this, and then I'm going to change this into a GET request and take out the update, you can see that the same ID now has a description of walk and a duration of 120. But actually, we don't even want that anymore, so we are going to delete it. Instead of sending it the GET request, I will send a delete, and then if I send that, exercise deleted. So now I'm just going to go to the URL, the route that returns all of the exercises. So just /exercises/ and then a GET request, and you'll see that now we just have one exercise, whereas before we had two. One of them's been deleted, so we just have the one. Okay, now that we've tested this, we're actually done with the backend. We just had a simple backend with some CRUD routes, so now it's time to start the front end. Before we get into our front end code, let's talk a little bit about React. Now, I'm just going to give a brief overview of React. If you want a full in-depth tutorial, you can check out the React tutorial on the FreeCodeCamp YouTube channel. React is a declarative, efficient, and flexible JavaScript library for building user interfaces. It lets you compose complex user interfaces from small and isolated pieces of code called components. Now, our project isn't too complex, but it's still going to give you a good introduction to React. We use components to tell React what we want to see on the screen. So this is an example of a type of React component right here. And when our data changes, React will efficiently update and re-render our components. So this is a React component class. You can see it says react.component. That's what this extends here. And a component takes in parameters called props, short for properties, and it returns a hierarchy of views to display through the render method. So you can see we have a render method here, and then it's returning something here. The render method returns a description of what you want to see on the screen. It takes a description and displays the result. It returns a React element, which is a lightweight description of what to render. This syntax here, it kind of looks like HTML, but it's actually a special syntax called JSX, which makes the structures easier to write. So this is actually converted into HTML when it goes through pre-processing. And JSX comes with the full power of JavaScript. You can put any JavaScript expressions within braces. So you can see these braces where it says this.props.name. This is getting the props are kind of like a variable. And you can see the example usage. So to call this React component or to place it on the page, you'll use something like we have at the bottom. So we have the name of the React component, and then we pass in the props, name equals bow. So right in what we're returning, when it says this.props.name, it's going to put bow. So on the page, it will return shopping list for bow. So another common difference between JSX and HTML is instead of class, we have class name. But for the most part, you can write JSX just like you would write HTML. So let's go to the code. So remember earlier, we did create React app that created our whole React project. I'm going to close some of this backend code because we're not going to use that right now because we're working on the front end. So right now I'm going to go over some of what the front end code. So if I go to the source directory, and then we're going to go into, actually let's start in public, and we'll go to the index.html. So this is the HTML page that loads when you go to our website. So let me kind of explain this so you can see how React works with it. So for one, we don't need any of these comments. So I'll delete that so it's easier to see what's going on here. And you can see this line right here is where our React app is going to load. It says div id equals root, and you'll see in our JavaScript we are going to load our React app right into that div. The only thing we really need to change here is the title. So instead of React app, I will call this exercise tracker and save that. And then if we go into our JavaScript that loads with our HTML, it's right here. So this is our basic JavaScript file that loads, and you can see it's going to load React, React DOM, the index.css. We are not writing any custom CSS, so we can get rid of that. Importing app, this is where we're actually going to create our file. This is basically the starting point where we're gonna, within the app.js, we import it here, and that's where we're gonna create our front-end React app. And you can see down here, this is the main thing that renders our app. React DOM.render, it's going to render our app, which is what we're going to be working on next, and it's going to put it here, document.getElementById root. That's what we were just looking at in the HTML file, the root here. So we're loading our app into that element. So we're not going to use service workers, so we can delete some of this stuff. When you can delete that. When you use create React app, it sometimes gives you some extra things that you don't need. So let's go into the app.js. That's this file here. So this is our main app, our main component, our main React app that we're going to put all of our code that will display on the page. And actually, let's get this started so we can see what this looks like right now. I'm going to open up a new terminal window. So in this new terminal window, I'm just going to switch into our directory, the exercise tracker directory, and MERN exercise tracker, and then I'm just going to do npm start. Okay, so this is going to start our app, and it will load right here, right on localhost 3000. And here is our React app. you can see it says edit source / app to save and save to reload. So it's going to hot reload or automatically reload this page anytime we make some changes. So what I'm going to do here is just do some basic changes here. So let's see what we're going to do. We're not going to use this logo. We're not going to use this CSS here. And let's just return something basic. Instead of what we have here, I'm going to delete all of this, and we're just going to return, it's just going to say hello world. And for the class name app, I'll just call it container. So if I save this and I go back over to my browser, it says hello world. And so anything that we change here and update here, we'll see automatically on the page. So you can see this is being returned, this JSX, which gets loaded into our HTML with this JavaScript file, and it appears on our page. So now let's add the Bootstrap CSS framework to our project to make styling easier. So I'm going to open up a new terminal tab, and I will do npm install Bootstrap. Okay, while that's installing, I will go up here and I am going to import Bootstrap. So import bootstrap /dist/css/ bootstrap.min.css. So we have Bootstrap imported now. And now let's set up React Router, the React Router. So I'll do npm install React Router DOM. Okay, React Router is going to make it easier to route different URLs to different React components. You'll see how it works as we go along here. So I'm going to have to import it. So right at the top, right after we import React, this time I'm just going to paste in a line here. Import, we're importing browser router as router and route from React Router DOM. Okay, now we can create a router element. So now that we're importing this router from React Router DOM, we have to put everything that we want to be used with the router inside a router element. So what I'm going to do here is do router, and then at the end we will put the closing router tag. And then now, instead of our hello world, we're going to update it to start actually building the actual app here. So I'm just going to paste in some information here, and you'll see that we have a router element for each route of the application. So we have a few components. These are all components that we're still going to create. We have the navbar component, exercise list component, edit exercise, create exercise, and create user component. So these components we still have to create here. And you'll see that there's a route element for each route in the application. The path attribute is set to the URL path. So if you go to our root URL with a slash at the end, it will load this component. If you go to the root URL /edit, and then we have an ID, this is the MongoDB object ID. It will go to the edit exercise component, or the create component, or the create user component, depending on which path. So that's what React Router does, is it helps us map specific URL paths to different components that will load on the page. So we're going to have to create those 5 components, and we'll create them in separate files. But first, let's import the files we're just about to create into app.js right after the import for Bootstrap. So right after this, I will import all these. Let's add some semicolons. And so you see that we're importing, these are the names of the different components, and these are just where they're located. Components.navbar.component, component/exercise list.component. These files we're just about to create. You can see they're all in the components directory. So that's what we'll create now. So inside the same directory as app.js, inside the source directory, I'm going to create a new folder, and it's going to be called components. So inside this components folder, I'm going to create a new file called navbar.component.js. I'm just going to paste in this code here, and then I will go over it a little bit. So most React components are going to start the same. You're always going to import React and component from React, and then since we're using React Router, I'm going to import link. That's going to allow us to link to different routes. And then all components start like this. Export default class navbar, that's the name of the component, extends component. And all components have to render something. So we're going to render this return statement. And this code right here is basically just the navbar from the Bootstrap documentation converted to work for our purposes. You'll see that instead of class, we have class name. The links, instead of an anchor tag, we use this link from React Router, but it's going to show up the same way as just a link on there. And we show what we're going to link to here, and the different URLs we're going to link to. And then we have special classes, just a style, using Bootstrap styles. So you can always just check out the Bootstrap documentation if you want to learn more about the styles you can do with that. So at this point, we're going to create our other component files. So I'm going to create exercises list.component.js. I'm going to create edit exercises.component.js. Then we'll have create exercise.component.js. Then create user.component.js. And those are all of our component files. Right now we're just going to create stubs for these components just so we can see if everything works so far. So in the exercises list component, just put in this is just some basic, just the most basic component you can have. Importing React and component, export default class exercise list component extends component, and then we're just going to render you are on the exercise list component. So I'm just going to copy this code and go into the edit exercise component. I'll paste that in, and so instead of exercises list, we're going to do edit exercises. And again, instead of you are on the exercises list component, we'll just you are on the edit exercises component. And I'll copy that again. Let me make sure this is saved. And here, instead of exercises list, wait, I meant to copy this. It'll be easier to start with this one. Instead of edit exercise, it's going to be create. I'm just going to select edit and do Command D to select two places at once, and then I can just type in two places at once and it'll put the word create in both spots. So I'll save that, and then our create user component. So again, I'm actually going to copy this code, paste that in here. Instead of create exercises, Command D, I'm going to do create users. So you are on the create users component. The last thing I need to do is save app.js, and now we should be able to test this out. So let me go over to the browser. Ooh, failing to compile. I see what happened. This is the wrong type of quotation mark. So there we go. And let me go back over there. Cannot resolve create user component. Here is where I may have just spelled something wrong. Let's see. Component. Oh yeah, I just spelled this one wrong. So let me rename That's why it's good to test every once in a while you're building things, just to make sure everything's working. Let's see, it's looking for edit exercise, and I just put an S at the end of this. So let's take that off. And now we're going to work. And it's working. So it says you are on the exercise list component. When we click the different things, exercise, you are on the exercise list component. Click here, you are on the create exercise component. And then click here, you are on the create user component. And now I'm back on app.js, and there was one thing I want to improve, just to use the styling better from Bootstrap. Inside this router, I'm going to have a div, and we'll set the class name to equal container. And then we just need a closing div here at the end. And then I'll just indent this a little bit. So let's see what that looks like now. Okay, I think that looks a little better. So we have some space on the sides and everything's just a little more centered. Okay, let's start creating our first component. So we already created the stubs of the components, and now we're going to create the create exercise component. So here's create exercise, that component. So this will allow us to add exercises into the database. We're going to first add a constructor. So right here, I'm going to add the constructor here. And what you're going to do, constructor props. And in JavaScript classes, you need to always call super when defining the constructor of a subclass. So we're going to do that. All React component classes that have a constructor should start with a super props call. We'll set the initial state of the component by assigning an object to this.state. So do this.state equals, and we need a property. We're going to create properties of the state that will correspond to the fields of the MongoDB document. So we'll have username equals empty string, description. Oh, that's not supposed to be an equal sign. That's supposed to be a colon there. Let me fix that. And then we'll have duration. We'll start this as 0 because it's a number. And then the final thing is the date, which is going to be a new date. And then these are all the parts of the database, but we're also going to have something right just for this component called users. And you'll see how we're going to use that in a minute here. So state are basically how you create variables in React. You're never going to do something like let name equal bow or something like that. So in React, you're always going to create everything in state. So whenever you update the state, it will automatically update your page with the new values. So users, the reason why we have the users array here is because on our page, there's going to be a drop-down menu where you can select all the users that are already in the database. You can select a user to associate with your exercise. So now we need to add methods which can be used to update the state properties. So at the end of our constructor, I'm going to add a method here, on change username, and I'm going to pass an E. I'll explain the E just in a moment here, but when the username is being changed, we're going to set the state. So if we want to set here's something you will never do. You're not going to do this.state.username equals and then put in what the new username is. You always want to use the set state property or the set state method here in React. And inside here, we can set just the item we're going to change. Username is going to equal e.target.value. So this is going to be called we're going to have a web form where there's going to be a text box where someone enters the username. So whenever someone enters a username, it's going to call this function, and it's going to set the state e.target.value. Well, the target is the text box, and this is the value of the text box. So it's going to set the value of username to whatever the value was in that text box. Now, if we're just setting username, it's not going to put all the rest of our state to nothing. It doesn't replace state with just this. It just updates this element within the state. It's just going to update the username element within the state. So we need to do the same thing for all of our other ones. So let's just paste in here, and I'm going to change things. So onChange username is going to be onChange description. And then this is going to be description. onChange, this is going to be duration. And it's going to be duration. And then we have date. And then we have date here. Now this one's going to be a little different. We're going to use a library to make a calendar that appears, and you can click the date on the calendar. So we're going to pass in the date here, and we're just going to set it with the date that's passed in. After those methods, we will add one to handle the submit event on the form. So you'll see the form at the end of all this. I'm just creating these methods to handle the form first. So on submit, when someone clicks the submit button, this is what we're going to do. First, we're going to do e.prevent default. So this will prevent the default HTML form submit behavior from taking place. So instead of doing what it normally would have done, it's going to do what we're about to define here. So I have a const of an exercise, and remember I said you'll never just create variables normally in React. Well, that's inside a single method. You can create variables if they're only going to be used within that method. So const exercise equals, and then we're just going to set everything. So the username is going to be this.state.username, and the description is going to be this.state.description, and then we have duration is going to be this.state.duration, and then date is going to be this.state.date. So for now, all we're going to do with this exercise is do a console.log. Console.log exercise. Now, eventually, this is going to be the part where we submit the exercise to the database. But we're just going to finish up a little bit of our front end first, and then we're going to connect our front end to the back end. So after this, the exercise has been submitted, we'll just do window.location equals /. So we're just going to take the person back to our home page, which is going to be the list of exercises. So once you submit an exercise, it will go back to the list of exercises. So now we just have to make sure that the word this works properly in our methods. So if we see the word where it says this.setState, this.setState, if we were to do a console.log this within this method, we would see that this is undefined. So we need to make sure that when it says this inside a method, we know what this is referring to. And we want this to refer to the class, this whole class. So what we have to do is up here, I'm going to paste in some code here, and it says this.onChangeUsername equals this.onChangeUsername.bind.this. So we're binding this to each of these methods, so the word this will be referring to the right thing. We're just about to add the form that will allow people to enter exercises. But first, we must add one final method. People filling out the form, like I was mentioning earlier, they're going to select the user associated with the exercise from a drop-down list. Eventually, the user list will come directly from the MongoDB database. For now, though, we'll hard code a single user. So let's add a method here. This is going to be component did mount. Now this is a React lifecycle method. So there's a few lifecycle methods in React that React will automatically call at different points. So component did mount will automatically be called right before anything displays on the page. So when this create exercise component is about to load to the page, right before anything loads, it's going to run this code. So what we're going to do here is do this.set state, and we are going to set the state of our users array. So users is going to equal, now here we're just doing a test user. Eventually we will load this directly from the database, but we're doing one step at a time here. And we also want to set the username to test user. The drop-down menu will automatically have the first user in the drop-down selected, so we want the username to be set to that user right at the very beginning. The final thing we need to do is to add the form code. So I'm just about to paste the form code in here right at the bottom, and then I'll kind of just go over it here. I'm going to paste that in and put that back. So this is just a pretty standard HTML form. We have our heading, create new exercise log. On submit, when you submit, it's going to call the this.onSubmit. So you can see we have these curly braces, and we can put in JavaScript or different methods. And so we can say that we're going to call the this.onSubmit when someone clicks that button. So we have our username, which is just, this is a drop-down menu. So in this drop-down menu, we're going to set the value to this.state.username, and then on change, whenever you change the selection, this.onChange username. Now this is where we do something a little fancy. So inside a select box, we have different options, and we're getting the options right from our users array. So you can see we have the curly braces, which means we can put some JavaScript in here, and it says this.state.users, which is an array of all the users, which will come from our MongoDB Atlas database. .map. .map allows us to return something for each element in an array. So we have this function. Now this could also be an arrow function if we were going to refactor, but for now it's just a regular function. So it's going to take a user. So for each user in the array, it's going to return this. It's going to return an option, which is an option of the select box. And in this option, we have a key, which is the user, a value, which is the user, and then the actual text that will appear, which is also the user. And then we have the description, which is just a standard input box, but we set the value and we set the onChange method to be called anytime this is changed. We have duration, which is in minutes, like I mentioned before. So we have the value, the onChange method. Now the date is going to be a little different. We have a date method, a date picker component, which we still have to add. So this date picker component is going to pop up a calendar where you can select an actual date. So we put what the initial selection is and what happens when you change that selection. So this date picker component, we are actually going to install a package with npm. So we don't have to create ourselves. This is already a package that exists. So down in the terminal, we'll do npm install react date picker. And while that's installing, we are going to have to put in a line to import it at the top. So right at the top, I'm going to put in 2 lines after we import React. We're going to import date picker from React date picker, and then a line to import the styling for that date picker. So at this point, we can actually test this. So I'm going to save this, and we'll go back over to our browser, and I'm going to click create exercise log. So it says create new exercise log. I'm going to open up my browser. For on a Mac, it's Command Option J if you're on Chrome, but it may be something different. And I think I said open my browser. I meant open my console. So I'm going to open my JavaScript console. Whoops, did not mean to click that. Okay, I'm going to open up my JavaScript console, and you'll see when I create something. So I'll select test user. I'll put run. I'll put 10 for 10 minutes, and then here's the date picker I was talking about. So we can select a date here. And if I click create exercise log, you'll see two things happened. First, it logged it to the console here. You can see it says test user, description run, duration 10, and then we have the date that we put in here. And then right after it logged it, we got taken back to our exercise list component. So you can see with Bootstrap, it makes it responsive to different sizes here. So the exercise list component, we still have to create, but eventually it will show all the exercises that are in the database. Okay, now that we've created that component and we've tested it out, we are going to create the create user component. So let me go over to the create user component, and we are going to have another constructor. So actually this constructor is going to be kind of similar. I'm going to start by just copying this constructor from the create exercise component and then putting it in the create user component. But this time we're only going to have an onChange username and then an onSubmit button. Our state is only going to have a username like that. And then, just like our other thing, we're going to have a onChange username method, and we will have an onSubmit method, which is going to be pretty similar. So I'm just going to copy and paste just like before. So when it's just going to be a simple web form with just a username field. And then once this is submitted, instead of exercise, we're going to call it user, and then we're just going to have the username, and I'm going to console.log the user. And this time, instead of changing the location back to the home page, we'll just keep the user on this page so they can enter multiple users at a time. So to do that, we have to do this.setState, and we have to set the username to blank, because after someone's already entered the user, we should set it back to blank so they can enter another username. Now, just like I said before, we are eventually going to make this connect to the database, but for now we're just going to set the state just like that. So let's see if I see this is grayed out here. I don't know exactly what's wrong. Types this.setState. I don't think anything's wrong, so I don't know why it's giving us this error. Let's just test it out and see what happens. But first we're going to have to add our code for our form. So, whoops. I'm going to go to the render. So what we're going to render here is just a very simple web form that has one field. So it says create new user, there's a submit button, and then we just have one input box with a value of username, and onChange is onChange username. So if I save this, we can go back over into our browser, and I see what I did wrong there. So I just put this in the wrong order. So that should be parentheses and then brackets. And then I can just take this up to here and get rid of that. Okay, so now we should be able to save it. Okay, so we already tested create username. Let me clear the console here. Now we're going to test create user. So if I type in Bo and click create user, it will show up in the console, and then this is blank so we can enter another user. So that works. So now we can submit users and it shows up in the console. We're now going to work on connecting the front end to the back end. So far, the front end and the back end of our app are separate. So we're going to be connecting the two together by causing our front end to send HTTP requests to the server endpoints on the back end. We'll use the Axios library to send the HTTP request to our back end. So in our terminal, we'll install that, npm install Axios. And now we'll complete the implementation of the create user component and send data to the backend. So at the very top of the create user component, I'm going to import Axios from Axios. And then we just have to go down to the submit button. So in the submit button, right after console.log, we'll still log the user, but now we are going to send the user data to our backend. So I'll do axios.post, and then we have to put in the URL. So it's http://localhost5000/users/add. And then I just do comma user. So after we post that, we'll do a .then. So this is going to be a promise. So after it's posted, then we're going to do something. And what we're going to do is take the result, and we're going to do console.log res.data. So you can see this axios.post method that's going to send an HTTP post request to this backend endpoint, and it's going to, the endpoint is expecting a JSON object in the request body, and that's what we do here. We send that as a second argument. So let me just go into our backend so you can actually see what that looks like in the backend. I think I'm going to have to open that file again, the server.js. Or actually, it's in the routes, the users.js. So this is the route we're doing. So we're sending a GET request or a post request to users/add, and it's going to expect in the body request.body.username, the username, and then we create a new user, and then we save the user. So now that we have this done, we can just save it, and we can test things out. I will create a new user, Mary, and then new create user, user added. And right now, if I add a user that's already in the database, like Bo, we'll see an error right in the log. Now, something to do to refactor later would be to handle this error differently, but right now, we're not going to do anything about that. We're just going to have the error in the log, because it won't accept any duplicate username. So if we go into MongoDB Atlas, the dashboard, and I click refresh, we should see the Mary username. So now we see username Mary, and it's been added to our database. So we got that working. Let's go back over to the code, and let's start completing the implementation of the create exercise component. So I'll go over to the create exercise component. At the very top, just like before, we are going to import Axios from Axios. And then I'm going to do an axios.post right in the on submit. So it's actually going to look very similar to the create user one. So if I just copy this and bring it over here, right after we log the exercise, we will post it. But instead of /users, it's going to be /exercise. Instead of user, it's going to be exercise. And then we'll just log the result to the console, which would be exercise added. So you can see right in the, let's go over to the back end again. When it gets this route, the post, and then we have the add, will get all the information from the body, we create the new exercise, and then we send the JSON exercise added. And that's what will show up in the console with the console.log rest.data. So we're not quite ready to test this out because we still need to update our component will mount method. So if you remember, we have a drop-down menu where you can select users, and it should show all the users that have currently been added to the database in the drop-down menu. So I'm just going to cut this code out here, and right now we are going to do another Axios, but this time it's going to be axios.get. We're going to send a GET request to http://localhost 5000/users, and after we do the request, then we are going to take the response, we'll pass it into this arrow function, and now we want to check if there is a response. So if response.data.length is more than 0. So basically we're checking that there's at least one user in the database. And if so, then I'm just going to paste in that set state that I cut out before, but we're going to not use this sample data anymore. I'm going to put response.data.map. So data is going to be an array, and we're going to map the array, which will allow us to return something for every element in the array. So what we're going to return is user, and we'll pass in each user in the array, we're going to return user.username. So to kind of explain that, where it's user.username, let's go back over to MongoDB Atlas dashboard. So the array of users is going to be each of these items. So this is the first item in the array, this is the second item in the array, this is the third item in the array, but we just want the username field. So if we go back over here, instead of getting all those different fields, that's why we're just going to return user.username, because we don't care about the object ID or the created at or updated at date for this. So for the username, this is going to be response.data, and then I'll do the 0 index of the array, the first element in the array, .username. Okay, so username is automatically set to the first user in the database. This is what we just did. So now we can test this out. So I can go back over here and go back to the exercise tracker. So I will do exercise, create exercise log. So look, now it's showing a drop-down menu of every name from our array. We're getting this right from our array. So I will choose Mary, and for the description, I will put bike ride, and then the duration, 65 minutes, and then the date, just click a date here, and then create exercise log. Okay, it's a good thing we're testing it out, because I just realized this post URL is wrong. It's supposed to be exercises with a plural here. So let's try that one more time. Go to create exercise log, Mary, bike ride, 65, and choose a date. And good, we don't see an error in here. So now I can go and check out MongoDB Atlas, and then we'll see we have the exercises here. So I'll go to the exercises, and this is one we already had, but if we go to the bottom, now we have Mary, bike ride, duration 65, and the date that we entered. Great, this seems to be working. Okay, now we will complete the exercise list component. So let's go to the exercise list component right here. So this is still a stub. This is going to show every exercise that has been added to the database, and this will be the home page of our app. So at the very beginning, we are going to import some things. We're already importing React, but I am also going to import link from React Router DOM, and then I'm going to import Axios. So now we're going to start with a constructor to initialize the state with an empty exercises array. So we'll do constructor props, and we are going to first do super props. You always start with super props. And then before I created a method, and then I would bind this to the method, but this time we'll do it the other way around. So we know we're going to create a method called delete exercise, because in the list of exercises we are going to have you're going to be able to click a button to delete the exercise. So we're going to do bind this, and then I just have to initialize the state. So this dot state is going to be equal to, and since there's only going to be one item, I'm going to just put it all in one line. It's going to be exercises, and then it's just going to be an empty array of exercises. So we got that. Now we're going to get that list of exercises from the database. So we're going to do that in a component did mount method. Just like before when we got the list of users from the database, we're going to get the list of exercises from the database. So we'll do axios.get, and then I'll just put http://localhost 5000/exercises/ and then we'll do a .then, and we'll take the response and we will do this .set state, and before, wait, let me just finish this. Exercises is going to be response.data. So before, when we were getting the usernames, we got just the username field because we didn't want to return all the fields. But in this case, we do want all the fields for the exercises. So we're gonna get the object ID, the username, the description, duration, date, created at, updated at. We're gonna get all of this stuff, and we're gonna put it into the exercises array here. So after this, we are going to just catch any errors that we would have. So we have error. And let's see, we'll just console.log the error if there's an error. And I think there's a few other places where I could have also caught an error that I may have missed. But we have this here. So the code will run before the page is rendered and add the list of exercises to the state. And obviously we got the axios.get endpoint that's going to get all the exercises from here. So if we go to the exercises here, so here, let's go to that get endpoint. That's just this one right here. So when we go to the exercises / and it's a get request, we'll do exercise.find, which is going to return all the exercises and return it as JSON. And now we have it we'll get it here, and we will set the state. So this component, like I said, will also allow users to delete exercises. So let's create the method for that. So this time I'm just going to paste in the code, and then I will explain it. I'll do it right after this. We have delete exercise, and it's going to take an ID. So this is the object ID that we will be deleting, the object ID that MongoDB automatically assigns to the thing that we're going to be deleting. So we have axios.delete. We're sending a delete request to this URL /ID. It's going to put the ID at the end. Remember, this is an exact route that we created in the back end. So once that happens, we are going to do a .then, and we're just going to log that it's been deleted. It will say exercise deleted that we get right from the back end. So after we delete the exercise on the database, we also have to delete the exercise from what's being displayed to the user. So it's going to be a table, and there's going to be a row for each exercise. And we want to delete that element, that item, right from the table. So we can do that. This is where React makes things really easy. So we're just going to set the state, and we're going to set the state of exercises. And whenever you do set state, it will automatically, React will automatically update the page with that new state. So look how this is going to work. This.state.exercises, that's the array of exercises, and now we're going to filter it. That means we are only going to return certain elements back to exercises here. And this is what we're going to do. So for every element in the exercises array, we are going to return it if L._ID does not equal ID. So whenever the ID of the exercise in this exercises array does not equal the ID that we're deleting, we'll pass it back to the exercises array. So this is just a way to just remove the exercise that we're deleting. So you may be wondering, where does this underscore ID come from? We've just been using ID. We've never made an underscore ID. Well, if we go back to the MongoDB dashboard, you'll see that the underscore ID is automatically created. So the ID in the database is underscore ID, and that's just created automatically when we create the object. So after this, we can we're going to update the return statement of the render function. So this is where we create the JSX, or like it's similar to HTML, that's going to display on the page. So I'll just paste this in here. So you can see here we have our heading, and this is going to be a table, and then this is just a styling from Bootstrap. And then we have all our username, description, duration, date, actions, or headers. And then this is where it gets interesting. The body, it's going to call that method. It's going to call the exercise list method, which we need to implement. And that's going to return the rows of the table. So directly above this, I'm going to paste in the method here, exercise list. So it calls this.exercise list. An exercise list, it's going to return this. This.state.exercises.map. Remember, .map is going to return something for every element in the array. So for every element called current exercise, it's going to return a component. So this exercise component is something that we are just about to create. So for every element in the exercise array, it's going to return a component, and that component is basically going to be a row of the table. And we're going to pass in some props. There's 2 props, or actually 3 props that we're passing in. Let me make some more room here. So we're going to pass in the current exercise. So these are basically, you can think of them as variables. So here's the variable name, here's the value. So we're passing in the current exercise, we're passing in the delete exercise method here, and then we're going to pass in the key, which is the just current exercise.id. So this exercise component, let me just put in this exercise component, and then I'll talk a little bit more about it. So I'm going to put it in up here above the other component. So now this one file actually has 2 components in it. We have this exercises list.component.js, that's the file, and we have 2 components. We have the exercises list component, and we have the exercise component right above here. There are 2 types of components in this file now. The exercise component is implemented as a functional React component. And here, this is implemented as a class component. You'll see the word class here. So the key thing that makes a functional React component different from a class component is the lack of state and lifecycle methods. So we don't have a state, we don't have a component didn't mount lifecycle method. So If all you need to do is to accept props and return JSX, you should use a functional component instead of a class component. And you can see that for most of the components in our app, we have a separate file. But since this is such a small component, we've just put it in the same file in the exercise list.component.js. So let's look at what this component is doing. It's accepting the props, which are the props that were passed into it, like exercise, delete exercise, and the key here. And so it's going to return a row of the table, a table row. So we have props.exercise.username, and where the exercise was passed in, props.exercise.description, .duration, .date, and you can see we have a substring here. That's because the date is a full date time string that includes date, time, and time zone, and we just want the first part of it, which is just the date part. So now we have a link. We're using the link from React Router DOM, so it's going to link to a certain URL, which is just going to load another component on the page. So we're gonna go to the edit. So it's edit/props.exercise.id. So this is a component that we still have to create, that we're creating next, the edit exercise component. And then we're also going to have a delete button. It's a delete link. And so on click, once you click that, it's going to call this props.deleteExercise. So we've just passed in the method from the other component. That delete exercise method is right here, but we've passed into this other component, and so we can actually delete that exercise here. And so it's going to call down here the delete exercise component. Where did that go? Here, where it's going to send a call to the database, or to the backend, which connects to the database. You can see these squiggly lines here. It's just notifying us of best practice. Technically, the best practice here would be to use a button and style it as a link. But in this case, we're just going to do it like this. If you want to refactor it later, you can style this as a button. You can create a button instead of a link here. But because the href isn't going to anything, the best practice would be to make this a button. But like I said, we're not going to take the time to do that right now. So now we've finished this, but before we test it out, we are going to create the edit exercise component. Now the edit exercise component is very similar to the create exercise component. In fact, I'm going to start by just copying all this code and then just pasting it in here. Now, another thing you could do for refactoring is you could actually combine both of these into a single component and then just update things with the props based on how it's going to display. But for now, we're just going to create two separate components. So this is going to be called edit exercise instead of create exercise. And all this stuff is going to stay the same. Something new is going to happen though in this component did mount. So here we're going to get the users, but really everything's going to be the same here, except we're not going to set the username, because we are going to set the username from the exercise we are editing. So we're going to have to put in another Axios .get command here. So I just pasted this in. We have axios.get. We're going to HTTP localhost 5000 exercises. We are passing in the ID. Now this, where it says this.props.match.params.id, we're getting the ID directly from the URL here. So we are now getting the exercise that has that ID from the backend, and as the response, it's going to return that exercise, and we're going to do this.setState. So we're going to set the state of the username, description, and duration just with the response.data.username.data.description, and so on here. And then here we're going to convert it into a date. So we have the correct date here. And now there's just a few other things we need to update. So instead of this axios.post and then exercises/add, it's now going to be exercises/update. And then we have to pass in the ID, which is going to be this.props.match.params.id. And then still we're going to the second thing we're going to pass in is exercise here. And we can still keep this the same. And then we just have a few things to change down here. Instead of create new exercise, it's going to be edit exercise log, or edit with a T. And then down here, it will just be edit exercise log. And we just finished that. So like I said, it's very similar. The edit exercise and the create exercise is very similar. So now we can test this out. Let me go into our exercise tracker app. Just going to close the console for now. And you can see we have these logged exercises here. Let's just add one more exercise so we can have another thing on our list there. So how about a run? Quincy is going to go for a run for only 1 minute. So this is going to be a very short run because he has to take his daughter to school. So create exercise log, and now we have 3 exercises: Bo, Mary, and Quincy. Bike ride, run. We have different durations. And now the edit thing should work. So actually, Quincy is going to run for a little more than 1 minute. We'll go to edit, and then now it's going to be 100 minutes. And if I click edit exercise log, it's now going to show 100 minutes here. And if we go to the dashboard here on MongoDB Atlas, we should see, yeah, Quincy run and duration 100. It successfully edited that. But now we're going to try delete. So if I click delete, it deletes from our table automatically. And let's go see if it got deleted from our database. Refresh here. And it has been deleted from the database. We just have the 2 items now. So now this app is completely complete. We've done the whole thing, and hopefully you've learned a lot about how to create an app with the MERN stack and how to use MongoDB Atlas. The code is all going to be in the description for this. So thanks for watching. My name is Bo Carnes, and I hope you will use your code for good.